I raised a child who attacked kids and destroyed their belongings and told the neighborhood to simply adjust. They removed my son from every birthday party and gathering until I snapped, held them all hostage, and was dragged away by police. I'm writing this from my mother's guest bedroom with an ankle monitor and a court date in 11 days. My son is 10 years old and living with his father full-time. I haven't seen him in 6 weeks. My lawyer told me to stop talking about the case publicly. I'm writing this anyway because the version of me that listened to good advice died in a neighbor's living room on a Saturday afternoon in April when I barricaded a door and screamed at 9 families until the police broke a window to get in. That happened. I did that. And the worst part isn't the arrest. The worst part is that I still had to be tackled by 2 officers before I understood that I was the problem. Not the neighborhood. Not the other parents. Not the school. Not the birthday party invitations that stopped coming. Me. My son's name is Bryce. He's 10. He's big for his age. Tallest kid in his class. Strongest too. I used to be proud of that. I used to say, he's just physical. He's a boy. Boys are rough. That was my script. Every time a teacher called. Every time a parent pulled me aside. Every time another kid went home crying. He's just physical. He's a boy. Boys are rough. Bryce hit a kid named Sammy in 1st grade. Knocked him off the monkey bars. Sammy broke his wrist. I said Bryce didn't mean it. They were playing. I said Sammy shouldn't have been hanging so close to the edge. The school gave Bryce a 3-day suspension. I fought it. I went to the principal's office and said, he's 6. He doesn't understand force yet. Give him time. They gave him time. He used it to push a girl named Aita into a door frame because she wouldn't let him be first in line. She got a bruise on her forehead the size of a golf ball. I said it was an accident. Ada's mother said, your son shoved my daughter into a metal door frame. I said, kids bump into each other. It happens. It didn't just happen. It kept happening. 2nd grade. Bryce ripped a kid's science project off the wall because the kid got a gold star and Bryce got a silver one. The project was a solar system model made from clay. The kid and his dad spent a weekend building it. Bryce tore Saturn off and crushed it in his hand. I said, he was frustrated. He's competitive. That's a good trait. 3rd grade. Bryce took a girl's glasses off her face during recess and threw them. She couldn't find them for 20 minutes. She sat on the ground crying because she couldn't see. Her mother called me that night. She said, your son took my daughter's glasses and threw them. She has a prescription. Those cost $400. I said, he was probably playing around. He doesn't understand. The mother said, he's 8. He understands. I said, maybe your daughter should have a strap or something so they don't come off. She hung up on me. I told myself she was being dramatic. 3rd grade again. Different incident. Bryce kicked over a kid's birthday cupcakes during the classroom party. The kid's mom had baked them from scratch. 30 cupcakes. Decorated with the kid's favorite cartoon characters. Bryce kicked the table leg and the tray slid off. Frosting on the floor. The birthday kid cried. Bryce laughed. The teacher called me. I said, it was an accident. He bumped the table. She said, Mrs. Palmer. He kicked it. 3 students and I saw him kick it. He was upset because the birthday boy got extra attention. I said, so what? He's supposed to sit there while another kid gets celebrated and he doesn't. She said, yes. That's exactly what he's supposed to do. I reported her to the principal for targeting my son. 4th grade. New school. I pulled him from the old one because I said the environment was toxic. The truth is 3 families had filed formal complaints and the school suggested an evaluation. I refused the evaluation. I said there was nothing wrong with my son. I said the other kids were soft. I said the parents were helicopter parents raising fragile children. New school. 2 months in. Bryce destroyed a girl's art project. Not accidentally. She was working on a watercolor painting for an art show. It was a landscape. Trees. A river. A sunset. She'd been working on it for 3 weeks. Bryce poured his water cup over it during class. The teacher saw everything. The girl sat there watching the colors bleed together into brown. She didn't cry. She just stared. That part bothered me for years later. Not the crying kids. The quiet ones. The ones who stopped reacting because they'd learned that adults wouldn't help them. I said, he's impulsive. He didn't think it through. The girl's father came to the school. He said, my daughter spent 3 weeks on that painting. Your son poured water on it and laughed. What are you going to do about it? I said, I'll talk to him. He said, you've been talking to him for 4 years. When does the talking become action? I said, don't tell me how to raise my son. He said, someone needs to. I asked the principal to ban that father from the school. She declined. Fourth grade continued. The invitations stopped. Birthday parties. Playdates. Group hangouts. Everything. One by one. Like lights going off in a building. By November, Bryce hadn't been invited to a single event outside of school. I noticed because Bryce noticed. He came home one Friday and said, everyone's going to Jordan's house this weekend and I'm not invited. I said, that's not nice of them. He said, Jordan's mom said I couldn't come. I said, why? He said, I don't know. I knew. I just didn't say it. I called Jordan's mother. Her name was Valerie. I said, hey, I noticed Bryce wasn't invited to Jordan's gathering this weekend. Is everything okay? Valerie paused. She said, Lorraine, I'm going to be honest. We've had multiple incidents where Bryce has hurt kids or broken their things. I've spoken to several other parents and we've all reached the same conclusion independently. We can't invite Bryce to events where our children could be at risk. I said, at risk? He's 10. She said, he's 10 and he's broken a child's wrist. He's thrown glasses. He's destroyed projects. He's kicked over birthday cupcakes. These aren't accidents anymore. This is a pattern. And you've refused to address it at every turn. I said, so you're punishing him? She said, we're protecting our kids. I said, by isolating mine. She said, Lorraine, we've asked you to get him evaluated. We've asked you to work with the school. We've asked for basic accountability after every single incident. You've blamed the other kids every time. You've blamed the teachers. You've blamed the parents. The only person you've never blamed is Bryce. And the only person you've never held accountable is yourself. I hung up. I was shaking. Not from guilt. From rage. I called every parent I had a number for. 7 families. Same answer. Different words but same answer. We love Bryce but we can't risk our kids' safety. Not until something changes. I posted on the Neighbourhood Facebook group. I didn't name names. I wrote something like, sad that a community would exclude a child instead of helping him grow. Disappointed in adults who punish kids for being kids. 3 parents responded publicly. Politely. With receipts. One posted a photo of her daughter's bruised forehead from the doorframe incident. Another posted a photo of the destroyed solar system project. A third described the watercolor incident in detail. I deleted the post within an hour. But screenshots existed. They always do. My ex-husband Dennis called that night. We divorced when Bryce was 5. Joint custody. He said, I saw the Facebook post before you deleted it. I said, it was a mistake. He said, Lorraine, we need to talk about Bryce. I said, not you too. He said, listen to me. When Bryce is with me he follows rules. He says please and thank you. He doesn't hit. He doesn't destroy things. You know why? Because there are consequences. When he breaks something at my house he fixes it or replaces it with his allowance. When he's rude he apologizes. When he hurts someone he sits down and writes a letter. And he does it. Every time. Without a fight. I said, so you're saying it's my fault? He said, I'm saying he acts differently in 2 different houses. And the only variable is you. I didn't speak to Dennis for 2 weeks after that call. Not because he was wrong. Because he was right and I couldn't stand it. January. Bryce came home from school and said, there's a class party on Friday and Mrs. Webb said I have to stay in the library during it. I said, what? He said, she said because of past incidents I have to sit in the library with the counselor instead of going to the party. I drove to the school the next morning. I said, you cannot exclude my son from a class event. The principal said, Mrs. Palmer. Bryce has had 4 incidents this year alone. 3 involving physical contact with other students. 1 involving destruction of property. We've requested an evaluation 3 times. You've declined each time. Until we can develop a behavioral plan we have to make accommodation decisions that protect all students. I said, this is discrimination. She said, this is consequences. I said, I'll get a lawyer. She said, that's your right. But Bryce will still be in the library on Friday. I didn't get a lawyer. I couldn't afford one. I sat in the parking lot and cried for 15 minutes. February. The Neighbourhood HOA meeting. Annual thing. Everyone shows up. Valerie was there. Jordan's mom. The woman who organized the parent consensus. She smiled at me when I walked in. A polite smile. The kind you give someone you've already made a decision about. During the community section, someone brought up the summer block party planning. Valerie said, "We should discuss the children's activity area and safety guidelines." I knew what that meant. Guidelines meant rules. Rules meant Bryce. Someone said, "Maybe we should have a sign-up sheet for the kids' zone with parent supervision requirements." Valerie said, "I think that's smart. Especially given past issues." She didn't say Bryce's name. She didn't have to. Everyone looked at me. I felt it. Every pair of eyes in that room. I said, "If you have something to say about my son, say it directly." Valerie said, "Lorraine. Nobody is singling Bryce out. We're establishing guidelines for all children." I said, "Guidelines that exist because of one child. My child." The room went quiet. Someone said, "Can we move on to the next item?" I left. Walked home. Sat in my living room. Stared at the wall. March. Bryce came home from school and said, "Nobody sat with me at lunch today." I said, "Nobody?" He said, "I sat at the end of the table. Some kids were at the other end. But nobody sat with me." I looked at my son. 10 years old. Sitting on the couch with his backpack still on. And for the first time I didn't feel anger at the other parents. I felt something else. Something I'd been running from for 4 years. The beginning of the thought that maybe they were right. Maybe I did this. But I pushed it down. Because admitting they were right meant admitting I'd been wrong about everything. Every phone call. Every meeting. Every time I said, "He's just physical. He's a boy. Boys are rough." Admitting they were right meant 4 years of my parenting had been a failure. And I wasn't ready for that. April. The block party planning committee scheduled a parents-only meeting at Valerie's house. Saturday afternoon. I wasn't on the committee, but I showed up anyway because the block party concerned my son, and I had a right to be there. 9 families were there. Valerie's living room. Couches and folding chairs. Coffee and snacks on the kitchen counter. Kids were upstairs in the playroom. Bryce was at Dennis's house that weekend, so he wasn't there. The meeting started normal. Schedule. Food assignments. Setup times. Then Valerie said, "We need to discuss the children's area supervision plan." And something broke in me. Not cracked. Broke. 4 years of phone calls. 4 years of blame. 4 years of watching invitations stop. 4 years of my son eating lunch alone. 4 years of being the mother everyone avoided at school pickup. 4 years of knowing, somewhere deep underneath the pride and the rage, that I had created this. All of it. Every broken wrist. Every crushed planet. Every pair of thrown glasses. Every watercolor turned to brown. I knew. I always knew. And I couldn't hold the knowing anymore. But it didn't come out as accountability. It came out as the worst version of myself. I stood up. I walked to Valerie's front door. I locked it. The deadbolt. Then I stood in front of it. The room went quiet. I said, "Nobody is leaving until we talk about what you've done to my son." Valerie stood up. She said, "Lorraine, unlock the door." I said, "No. You all sat in your houses and made a list of events my son can't attend. You organized against a 10-year-old. You taught your kids to exclude him. You made a child eat lunch alone. And you did it together. Like a campaign. And now you're going to sit here and hear what that did to him." A father named Warren said, "Lorraine, this isn't appropriate. Open the door." I said, "Sit down." Warren sat down. Not because I was right. Because I was unhinged and he was afraid. Everyone was afraid. I could see it on their faces. 9 families. 18 adults. Looking at me the way you look at someone who stopped being predictable. I yelled for 20 minutes. I don't remember everything I said. I remember fragments. I said you don't know what it's like to have a child nobody wants. I said you're all cowards. I said Valerie was a bully with a HOA title. I said Sammy's parents made a 6-year-old's broken wrist into a federal case. I said Ada's mother was dramatic. I said the solar system was ugly anyway. I said the solar system was ugly anyway. About a project a father and his 7-year-old built together over a weekend. I said it was ugly. Out loud. In a room full of people. While standing in front of a locked door. Someone's phone came out. I saw it. I said, "Put that away. Nobody is recording this." He didn't put it away. He was already dialing. Valerie said, "Lorraine, please. There are children upstairs. They can hear you." I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The thing that broke in me wasn't just cracking. It was flooding. Every excuse I'd ever made. Every lie I told myself. Every teacher I dismissed. Every parent I'd hung up on. It was all coming out, but it was coming out wrong. It was coming out as rage at the people who tried to help instead of rage at myself. Sirens. Someone had called from the kitchen. I didn't hear them make the call. But I heard the sirens. I moved away from the door. I sat on the floor. Not because I chose to. Because my legs gave out. The anger drained, and what replaced it was nothing. Just nothing. An empty space where a person used to be. The police came in through the back door. 2 officers. A woman and a man. The woman said, "Ma'am, are you Lorraine Palmer?" I said yes. She said, "We've received a call about a disturbance. I need you to stand up slowly." I stood up. She asked if anyone was hurt. Valerie said no. Physical harm, no. But everyone was shaken. The children upstairs were crying. A 7-year-old had heard me screaming and asked his mother if the angry lady was going to hurt them. A 7-year-old asked if I was going to hurt them. I was handcuffed in Valerie's front yard. In daylight. On a street where I'd lived for 6 years. My neighbors watched from their porches. The woman 3 doors down who I waved to every morning was holding her phone. Recording. They put me in the back of the car. I looked out the window and saw Valerie standing on her porch with her arms crossed. Not angry. Sad. She looked sad. And that was worse than anger. Because anger means you still care enough to fight. Sad means you've given up on the person entirely. I was charged with unlawful restraint. Disorderly conduct. Disturbing the peace. My bail was set at $5,000. My mother paid it. She picked me up from the county building and didn't say a word for the entire drive home. When we got to her house, she sat me down at the kitchen table. She said, "Tell me everything." I told her. All of it. Not just the meeting. Everything. Going back to first grade. The broken wrist. The glasses. The cupcakes. The watercolor. The Facebook post. The exclusion. Dennis's phone call. The school library. Every single thing. She listened. Didn't interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Lorraine, how long have you known Bryce needed help?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "How long? Don't lie to me. I'm your mother. How long have you known that something was wrong and refused to deal with it?" I looked at the table. I said, "Since first grade." She said, 4 years. I said, "Yes." She said, "You let your son hurt children for 4 years. You defended him every single time. You attacked every parent who tried to tell you. You refused evaluations. You changed schools. You blamed teachers. And when the entire community tried to protect their kids from yours, you locked them in a room and screamed at them." I said, "I know." She said, "No. You don't know. Because if you knew, you would have stopped. You didn't stop because you weren't protecting Bryce. You were protecting yourself. Your image of yourself as a good mother. That's what this was always about. Not Bryce. You." Dennis filed for emergency custody the Monday after my arrest. His lawyer submitted the police report. 3 parent statements. 2 teacher reports going back to 2nd grade. The evaluation requests I declined. The formal complaints from the old school. All of it organized. Documented. Dated. The judge granted temporary full custody to Dennis within 4 days. I stood in the courtroom and listened to a judge say that my son would be better off with his father. And I couldn't argue. Because every piece of evidence they presented was something I'd created. Every refused evaluation. Every confrontational meeting. Every excuse I made instead of getting my child the help he needed. Dennis didn't look at me after the ruling. He just picked up his folder and walked out. His lawyer stayed behind and said, "We'll arrange supervised visitation once Mrs. Palmer completes the court-mandated requirements." Court-mandated requirements. Anger management. Parenting classes. A psychological evaluation. For me. Not for Bryce. For me. The irony. 4 years of refusing to let anyone evaluate my son. And now a judge was ordering an evaluation of his mother. My mother drove me home from court. She said, "This is the bottom. You can either stay here or climb out. But if you climb out, you do it honestly. No more excuses. No more blaming. You look at what you did and you carry it." I started the parenting class. 8 weeks. Tuesday nights. 12 parents in a room with a facilitator named Dr. Okafor. First session, she asked everyone to describe why they were there. 1 sentence. My turn. I said, "I locked 9 families in a living room because I couldn't accept that my son needed help and I was the reason he wasn't getting it." Dr. Okafor said, "That's a good start." Week 3. She talked about the difference between protecting a child and protecting your ego. She said, when your child does something wrong and you defend the behavior instead of addressing it, you're not being a good parent. You're being a comfortable one. Comfort is not the same as care. Comfort says nothing is wrong. Care says something is wrong and I'm going to fix it even though it hurts. I wrote that in my notebook. I still have it. Week 5. She asked me to list every incident. Every single one. From first grade to the arrest. I filled 3 pages. When I read them aloud, I heard it the way other people heard it. Not as isolated accidents. As a pattern. A clear, documented, escalating pattern that any reasonable person would look at and say, this child needs help and this mother is in the way. I was in the way. For 4 years. I was the obstacle between my son and the help he needed. Not the school. Not the parents. Not the neighborhood. Me. Dennis allowed a supervised phone call with Bryce after my 4th week of class. A social worker was on the line. I said, "Hey buddy. How are you?" Bryce said, "I'm good. I'm doing a new thing at school." I said, "What thing?" He said, "It's called check-in. I talk to Ms. Rivera every morning and we go through how I'm feeling and what I'm going to do if I get frustrated. And then at the end of the day I check in again and we talk about how it went." I said, "Do you like it?" He said, "Yeah. She's nice. She says it's not about being bad. It's about learning better ways to handle stuff." I almost dropped the phone. Because that's all it took. A check-in. A counselor. A system. The thing I'd refused for 4 years. And my son was describing it to me like it was the most normal thing in the world. Because it was. It always was. And I made it into a war because admitting he needed it meant admitting I couldn't handle it alone. He said, "Mom." I wrote an apology letter to Jordan. For the time I broke his Lego set. Dennis helped me write it. Jordan wrote back and said thanks. Jordan. The kid whose parties Bryce couldn't attend. Writing back. Saying thanks. Because a 10-year-old boy wrote a genuine apology. That's all it took. A letter. Accountability. The thing I spent 4 years fighting against. He said, "I also wrote one to the girl whose painting I ruined." She didn't write back yet. But Ms. Rivera said that's okay. Some people take longer. My son. Writing apology letters. Voluntarily. In a house where accountability existed instead of being treated like an attack. Dennis got on the phone after Bryce went to his room. He said, he's doing well. His teacher says the improvement is significant. He had a playdate last weekend? First one in months. I said, with who? He said, a kid named Leo from his class. They played basketball in the driveway. No incidents. Leo's mom said Bryce was polite. Said please and thank you. Helped clean up the basketball when they were done. I said, that's. I couldn't finish. Dennis said, Lorraine. He was always capable of this. He just needed structure. And consequences. And someone who didn't tell him the world was wrong every time he made a mistake. That sentence. Every word of it was aimed at me. And every word was accurate. I completed anger management. 6 sessions. The counselor asked me in the final session what I learned. I said, I learned that my anger was never about the other parents. It was about me. I was angry at myself for knowing something was wrong and choosing to fight everyone who pointed it out instead of doing the work to fix it. I barricaded a door and screamed at 9 families because it was easier than looking in a mirror. She said, what are you going to do now? I said, whatever the court says. Whatever Dennis says. Whatever Bryce needs. She said, what about what you need? I said, I need to stop being the reason my son can't have a normal life. The supervised visitation started in June. 2 hours. Saturday mornings. A social worker in the room. Bryce walked in and hugged me. He said, I missed you, Mom. I held him. I said, I missed you too, buddy. I'm sorry. He said, for what? And I almost said, for everything. But that's too big. Too vague. He deserved specifics. I said, for not listening when people told me you needed help. For fighting everyone instead of getting you what you needed. For making you think the whole world was against you when really they were trying to help. I'm sorry for all of it. He said, it's okay, Mom. Ms. Rivera says people change when they're ready. My 10-year-old son quoting his school counselor to comfort his mother during a supervised visit in a government building. That's where my parenting got us. That's the result of 4 years of he's just physical. He's a boy. Boys are rough. Valerie sent me a letter through my mother. Handwritten. She said, Lorraine. I don't hate you. I never hated you. I was afraid of your son's behavior and frustrated by your response to it. But I always believed Bryce could change with the right support. I hope he's getting it now. I hope you are too. The door is open when you're ready. Not the locked one. The real one. I read it 4 times. Cried each time. The ankle monitor comes off next month. The charges were reduced. Community service. Probation. No jail time. My lawyer said the judge considered the parenting class completion and the evaluation results as mitigating factors. The evaluation. The one I finally took. The psychologist said I had traits consistent with defensive narcissism triggered by perceived threats to my identity as a competent mother. She said, "You experienced every complaint about Bryce as a personal attack on your worth as a parent. And you responded to those perceived attacks the way someone responds to a genuine threat. With escalation. With aggression. With fortification." Fortification. That's the word. I built walls around my son and told myself they were protection. They were a prison. For both of us. Bryce is doing well. Dennis sends updates. Photos sometimes. Bryce at a birthday party. Smiling. Standing in a group of kids. Not at the edge. In the middle. Where he belongs. He made a friend named Leo. They hang out every week. Leo's mom texts Dennis updates. She says, "Bryce is always welcome here." 4 words. Your son is always welcome here. I spent 4 years making sure nobody could say those words about my child. And now that I'm out of the way, they're saying them freely. I drive past Valerie Street sometimes. I see the block party banner going up. Bryce will be at Dennis's house that weekend. Dennis already RSVP'd for him. Bryce is going to the block party. Without me. Because I'm the one who isn't welcome. Not him. Me. I created a child people were afraid of. Not because he was bad. Because I taught him that his behavior had no consequences. That every broken thing was someone else's fault. That every hurt he caused was an accident. That the world should adjust to him instead of him learning to adjust to the world. And when the world refused to adjust, I barricaded a door and demanded it. My son is going to a block party. He's writing apology letters. He's checking in with a counselor. He's saying please and thank you. He's standing in the middle of a group photo. And I'm in my mother's guest bedroom with an ankle monitor and a court date and a letter from the woman whose living room I turned into a hostage scene taped to my mirror. The door is open when you're ready. Not the locked one. The real one. I locked the wrong door. For 4 years I locked the wrong door.